So, hey guys, you're very welcome to our Engage People videocast. Our purpose is to align business with talent, and as part of my working week, I'm very lucky to speak to some fantastic people. So delighted to be joined today by Nigel Dunne. Nigel's the CEO of Standard Life International. So we've lots to chat about Nigel. We're obviously having this conversation mid-June 2020. We're sort of, I'd like to say coming closer towards the end of COVID-19, but we'll discuss all of that, and then the plans that you guys are making for the months to come. But so first of all, how are things with you?
Yeah, not bad. A little bit better, having watched a little bit of football last night, so I'm starting to feel a sense of normality returning. So personally, it hasn't been a bad COVID experience. Obviously we've had lots of business challenges, but in lots of ways, I found positives from it, and I've enjoyed lots of it. I think you spotted me out running one day, being able to keep fit within the rules of what we're allowed to do. I've got quite used to working from a remote location, namely my box room in the house. And, I would have done it a bit over the years and over recent years. So it wasn't that strange for me, but probably hadn't anticipated ever doing it to the extent that I'm doing it, which we've all had to do in recent months.
And just from a sort of a habits perspective and just your day-to-day, so I know obviously in your role, and maybe just sort of a brief intro, so you're responsible for a few different countries. Say if we look at 2019, it's fair to say you're on planes, trains, automobiles. I mean, how has that been impacted?
Yeah, I kind of work my own little Bermuda Triangle. Our head office is principally Edinburgh, or where I'm kind of a part of a business that's centered in Edinburgh. Go to London and go to Frankfurt, but I'm usually between Edinburgh, Frankfurt and Dublin, responsible for our German and Austrian business. So yeah, there would be rarely a week, certainly every 2 weeks I'd be in a plane. You do question that. Haven't been obviously in a plane. I've hardly been in my car for 3 months, much less a plane. We've survived fine. And it's been great. And I actually don't think we're losing an awful lot as a result. I think the big question and why it works well is because everybody is working remotely, and while there's a finite length of time you can spend on these things all day, and it does get tiring and it is more exhausting than being in meetings, moving between meeting rooms. But when everybody's out of the workplace, it actually works quite effectively. I think one of the challenges we'll have longer term, we might pick it up, is when some are in the office and some are remote, does it work as well? But at the moment, it's been working great. I certainly haven't missed the airport, and if I was never in it again, other than for holidays, it would be a problem for me.
Yeah, very good. And we can talk about that piece, but I mean, from a personal routine perspective now, because I think a lot of people are saying they're getting a bit more, and obviously the weather's been generally good, albeit a little bit patchy over recent weeks, but you're finding you are getting out a bit more, you've a bit more control over your own time in terms of health, fitness, family?
I think so, yeah. Certainly family time has been great. Health has been fine. Probably, I think I heard the phrase, are you working from home? Are you sleeping in the office? Being used. And there's a little bit, but it's a challenge of mine personally to just leave work kind of behind. And I don't know, psychologically, when you're used to being in this environment all day, if there's something to be done, it's easy to slip up at 9 o'clock at night to finish off what you didn't get done during the day, which I wouldn't have done previously necessarily, because you'd kind of left the office environment. So there's a little bit of that, but beyond that, I try to keep the routines, pretty similar. Get up at the same time every morning. Was in a great routine until my calf went to go for an early morning run every day, and that was how I typically started the day, and it was fantastic. And I was probably doing more of that than I would have done going into the office early. So so good routine. I think good with the family. I have teenagers now, so again, I think it's something we might touch on, but circumstances are different for everybody. I have a quiet house until lunchtime. For anybody who's got teenagers knows. So it's a very easy environment for me. I'm not worried about little kids running around the place. So so it's actually been quite easy to slot into a work routine.
And tell us about, within your Irish operation, because I know you have a good big presence on Stephen's Green, obviously very well established business. How have you managed the communication side of things? So say in January, February? Because it all, I mean, this hit us now, certainly, our own business and Engage People, the first or second week of March was obviously becoming a little bit, it was becoming more and more obvious that, we weren't going to be able to remain in the workplace. We were a relatively small business. We were able to make the right decisions or make those adjustments. How did you manage it with the large international business?
Yeah, in hindsight, remarkably well. We had very little downtime. We'd slightly more challenges in Germany than we had in Ireland. I felt our Irish operation was able to adapt faster, but it wouldn't be unusual for us to do business continuity planning and to do kind of disaster scenarios from time to time. So we've often run simulations of not having the office. And the interesting thing is our answer previously is to move to our off-site disaster recovery site, which is out in Santry. One would have to question now what use that actually serves, given that when we obviously couldn't move there and we moved to a home environment, we've been able to run very effectively. So we found that most aspects of what we do, we were able to do remotely very quickly. So we were very quickly able to establish that we only needed a skeleton number of people in work, and that got smaller and smaller over the course of that period you were talking about. So over the course of probably a fortnight or maybe 10 days, we went from maybe half our staff working from home to, and that's staff at 360 or something in Stephen's Green, to a core of about 10 or 12 people. And we were able to get those 10 or 12 working on a rotation basis. And that was only because of kind of customer demand that comes in a kind of old-fashioned snail mail. So we still had post and demand coming into the office. So that was the only thing we had to deal with. And because of regulation, we've got to issue quite a lot of paper documentation. So we need somebody in to issue printed communication as well. So there was a bit of mail in, mail out activity. But other than that, including phones, the technology initially was a little bit unpredictable in terms of voice and phone traffic, but it was fine for data. So we were quite quickly able to engage. And it was really down to the strength of leadership, I think. Our team managers and department managers really rallied together very quickly and were able to get, I think we saw, a couple of weeks, the challenge we had is because we're in an investment, pensions investment type space, once COVID hit, markets went a bit bananas. So that increased demand for us. People switching out of products, some people wanting more information, what's happening to my pension, all that. So demand spiked as well. So some sectors demand would have gone down, ours went up. So we were challenged with that extra demand for the first couple of weeks, because not only were we working remotely, but we had more to do. But people were, I think, customers were very sympathetic. They were delighted they still had phone access to us. A lot of our competitors moved to mail, and we were able to stand up our phone service remotely, and that was a huge, I think, differentiator and benefit and calmed our customers down. So we got going quite quickly.
And just from an internal communication perspective, then you're able to, because it was a relatively sudden scenario, where we all had to make decisions within the space of a few weeks. And you mentioned, obviously, you had a good sort of leadership structure around you. Was it sort of regular communication at that point, or how did you go about?
Yeah, no, very regular. So we use, again, through our BCP planning, everybody we've access to all mobile phone numbers. So we've always got text-based service. So, at night, if we needed to do something overnight for the next morning, we could communicate to people via text. We stand up our BCP team. So we'll have an action team, which is made up of kind of senior management group across the business. And then, I took a fairly active front and center kind of position in terms of communicating to our people. But I have to say, I think everybody took a responsibility. What was really key at the start was to set out your kind of strategic intent. And first and foremost, it was about safety of our people. So that underlined everything that we did. And then it was continuity of service for our customers. So you keep it simple and clear. Yeah. And they were the two messages. Number one, keep our people safe. Number two, continue customer service and experience. And we do a lot of other things probably around the edges of all of that, which get deprioritized when you're focused. And I think by creating that focus, that sense of purpose for the organization and be very clear and succinct in what you're trying to achieve. I think that got people engaged and focused on what were the right things to do. And I think that worked.
Yeah, very good. So all the time invested in the business continuity planning. Who would have thought? That.
Yeah, we didn't plan for this scenario. We planned for fires and bombs and Stephen's Green and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, we hadn't done a pandemic. We planned for pandemics from a financial perspective, and we think about things like that in a financial services business. But we didn't think about how do we stand up our operation in this kind of situation.
And looking at, so you and I obviously we were chatting, and I'll give you a different view. So I speak to lots of different CEOs, business owners, HR, leadership, and there's definitely and you hear some tech companies saying, look, where remote is our future, etc. But the reality is it's not practical for every sector. I think there will definitely be an adjustment. I think that you've got maybe traditional Irish businesses where they think work is for work and home is for home, and that suits some people because they can walk out the front door of the office and their day is done and they go home and it's home and there's no sort of cross wires. You've also then, I guess, there's some roles basically, and I'd imagine in your sector, they're phone-based positions. People are discussing discrete information. So I know none of us have all the answers at the moment, but I mean, looking at the months ahead, what are the key sort of things that you guys are starting to talk about now in relation to getting back to the office, Nigel?
Yeah, I don't think we're necessarily using that phrase of getting back to the office yet.
Okay.
We're kind of talking about stepping stones to the future and what does the future look like, and the future will look different. And I think this is where it's been really interesting. I would have started, as I said to you, on the basis that, crikey, we're able to set this thing up remotely. Do we really need an office in Stephen's Green? Certainly not in that space anymore. But there is some middle ground that we have to find, and we have to find it. I'd be coming at this from an employee perspective, not necessarily from I think ultimately it'll help the company, but it's not a cost-saving exercise. It's not to reduce our footprint necessarily in the office in town. But I do think we can give a better employee experience, which will lead to better outputs and better returns for the company in time, if we can use what we're going through now to come up with a model that is more flexible. I think there's a lot of benefits, and it's kind of easy to corral 380 people or whatever, 60 people into an office. Turn the clock on, get them to work, do their work, leave and go home. But there's also lots of, and that model has worked for decades. I think there has to be an alternative model. And where I've seen the opportunities is when you put yourselves in the shoes of some of our people, I think we can create a much better work environment. I think if we could be more focused on outputs and not just, presenteeism and people being in front of you, I think we can be much more effective. We've quite a bit of staff turnover, particularly in developing roles, and it's circumstances which create some of that staff turnover. It might be females going off having their first kid or their second kid, and they find it hard to juggle crashes and all that, and then they decide it's too much hassle and they leave. We're losing great experienced staff because we can't flex our model to suit them. They're trying to get to crashes. They're trying to drive from Mullingar, wherever they're coming from, into Stephen's Green. So for that type of a situation, we should be able to flex our infrastructure and our kind of ways of working and our leadership so that we can facilitate people like that, which will help our diversity agenda, which will help, I think, the stability of our workforce, and will make us a more attractive place potentially to work. So I'm trying to focus on those positives. It's not without challenge, as we've touched on, and I suppose the thing I'm trying to prevent is that we don't set up two infrastructures, so you end up having a full infrastructure in Stephen's Green, and then have another 360 mini infrastructures sitting around people's offices. So it's trying to find that balance, and I think the other thing I've been trying to build into the chat in recent times is that it can't be a la carte either. We still need an element of structure. We still need to plan. We still need to know where our people are. We still need to know what infrastructure is needed. So within that flexibility, there'll have to be boundaries. There'll have to be controls. And it's finding that sweet spot is the challenge that we're going through now.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, or we had discussed just around, and every sector's has its own unique aspects to it. But there, if it's a phone-based position, for example, and it's a scenario whereby someone is, working remotely or work from home, and there's sort of confidential discussions, so there's that piece. Or it might be a scenario where you have someone who's working out of their bedroom and effectively then spending sort of 20 hours a day, between
Yeah,
sleeping and working in their bedroom. So I guess, I mean, these are the challenges to sort of overcome, I think, for all of us over the coming period of time. That it's, as you said, it can't be a la carte, but it's finding a solution that's fit for purpose. Basically, that's people first, obviously, but within that, basically, it's for the long term well being, I guess, of the people, as well as the financial security of the business too, in relation, aligned to the regulatory requirements.
absolutely, and and that's the detail we're trying to get into now. So
Yeah.
data security would be a very key one, as you've touched on there. We have to get that right. It's paramount that we keep our customers' data secure. So how do we do that if we work in a remote environment? The infrastructure that we use, there's increased cyber risk the way we work as well. And we've got health and safety, and health and safety is a huge issue. So, if it's, we've got to ensure that, people have an environment that is fit for purpose. Not everybody will have that. As I was saying to you earlier on this morning, my own is not ideal quite yet. So, but we all need to, we need to make sure that our people have the right infrastructure and the right support mechanisms in place from a health and safety perspective. As well as the regulatory stuff that we've got to do. And that's the detail, and that's the bit that'll make it a bit more challenging for us to move. And I think what we found, one of the things we've done in terms of engagement is we've done regular surveys. We've done probably too many. I think we've had to issued one yesterday, which is, I said it'd be the last one for a couple of months, because I think people are getting a bit fatigued by being asked how they are. And, there's a point at which I kind of say, listen, leave us alone. But I think the feedback we've got generally is, like, we've been very supportive as an organization, good leadership, but nobody are very, very few people are looking to move home full time. I think, if you were to look at what we're getting back, there's probably 80% odd. And when I look at locations, look at Germany, look at Ireland, look at the UK, it's pretty much the same. You're getting about 80% of people want to work in a more flexible way. And they would like to be in the office some of the time, a couple of days a week, some more than others. But there's only a very small, and it's single digits, who could foresee themselves working at home full time forever. And so if you're trying to satisfy that demand, you've got to come up with some sort of a flexible structure that has some boundaries on it. But we've opened that kind of hornet's nest, and I think we now have to deal with it. I think there's an opportunity still, and we need to grasp it.
Yeah. Well, look, I think the survey, I know you're saying it's sort of over communicating, but, by the sounds of it, I think the organizations that are maybe finding it a bit trickier are sort of maybe either kicking the can down the road or taking an authoritarian type view. So asking people how they're getting on, I think is a good way of navigating your way through it. Obviously there's going to be decisions that have to be made at some point, but it's you're probably with each stage moving closer towards that.
Yeah, and I think because I think the individual leadership is really, really important. So we've been pushing the responsibility down to the organization. It's not about what I say; it's about what the immediate manager of the individual in the organization is saying to their individual. Because we're not managing processes anymore or projects anymore. You're really managing individual and leading people in very individual circumstances, and that requires a bit of flexibility, and I think genuine leadership, as opposed to management, which happens in a lot of our organizations. And you can see the good ones have really excelled in this environment, and that feeds through quite clearly. And I think that's the type of leadership we need into the future, which will differentiate us and ensure that a model soon to be defined has a chance of working. Will really not be down to what we determine as the structure. Will be down to the quality of the people and the capability of our leadership to operate in that kind of an environment.
Yeah, actually, I mean to talk about the space you guys are in. What has the impact been? I mean, every day you open the business section of the paper. It seems to be. I know markets are always volatile, and you'll have one person saying one thing, another person saying another. What's been your experience over the next 3 months? And if you were brave enough to forecast maybe the second half of 2020, what's your what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. We're going through that process at the moment. Like we deal principally with intermediaries who deal with people who have investment and pension needs, often self-employed, small business owners, professionals, less so in the big corporate group pension space. So every subsector or every sub-segment of our sector will be challenged in different ways. We were pleasantly surprised how well our business kind of maintained in the early stages of COVID, but that's probably a reflection of kind of pipelines and conversations that have been happening and people coming up to retirement and, the natural flow of business. But certainly in the last few weeks, we've seen that kind of slow down as that kind of comes out of the system. And I'd be predicting in our space a relatively challenging period for the next, not only, 6 months, but into next year as well, as companies wait to get back on their feet. Revenues are down. There's other priorities. There's tax bills to be paid. There's priorities which will probably supersede those of pension provision. But that being said, there's a lot of people who've reflected about, life and what they're doing and whether they should be working and would they retire early and what's it all about. And that also creates opportunities for us. So it really is. It's difficult to work it through. We'll be very much predicated by how the economies, whether we have a deep recession for longer. But I think more so than that, and I think this is the unknown. Is it's about people and behaviors and how has this affected or impacted people's behaviors and will that be sustainable? Or is that a seismic change that's going to endure? Or is it something that's going to be short-lived and people are just going to go back to the way they were in a short period of time? And I think that's the big question. And that will drive how businesses like ours need to evolve. I think we have to evolve anyway. We have to evolve faster than we were, but that's the thing that'll drive, I think, a change in business.
And in relation to, because you've obviously got your employees and then a good range of intermediaries, from a communication perspective on the intermediary side, I guess to a degree, these meetings, maybe some of them used to happen in person. It's probably more video conversations and phone conversations going on. But any sort of change on that sort of broader relationship or anything that's featured?
I think it's been interesting. I definitely think we've managed to keep up engagement very well, and we've used this type of technology effectively, and it's made people think, why am I driving around the country to see guys as much as I used to? I think it's more from the advisor perspective. I think they're starting to see a more effective and efficient way as well, because they have a lot of engagement, a lot of contact. There's more effective and efficient ways, and they, by and large, have not been users of this kind of communication that much, the small business owners. So I'm definitely seeing changes there. I think what will be interesting long term is then from the customer side, do they feel the need to see people face to face as much as they used to? So, I heard a phrase recently. I was talking to somebody on this side, and they talked about this presence-free environment. So, like, people are operating in a presence-free world of online shopping and everything else, and that I think will possibly start to feed into some intermediated type activities. I don't think in an Irish context where we like contact and we like relationships, and I can't see it completely taken over, but it definitely has a greater place to play, and I think can help make the system more effective and efficient.
And just as a final piece on that, so we're all, certainly in our sector, so we invested in a video interview technology, and we use some of the more detailed online personality profiling testing. And I have to say, it has been, it's moved things forward quite a bit in terms of the service we're able to offer to our clients. We're also, we've put together quite a bit of material in relation to remote onboarding, which works better in some areas more than others. So in say the finance world and the accounting world, a lot of those packages are in the cloud, so there's inductions that can be done. from a skills perspective now, and again, I'm sort of asking you to look a little bit more into the future. What are the skills that you think within the broader life space, in the life insurance sector, if you were looking at, say, 2020, 2021, what are the new skills you think are going to be required in order to be successful?
Yeah, I think we're moving more in, maybe not over the next 3 to 5 years, into a much more digital world for a start. So not necessarily where we've been slow adapters, you know, I think as a sector by and large. I think that would be accelerated. I also think there'll be, you know, things like there'll be a move away from, you know, we've had a history where, you know, in very crude sense, you know, your sales office is on the ground floor, your administration was on the second floor, your investment manager's on the third floor, and your leadership team sat on the top floor, or something like that. I know it's not necessarily like that, but conceptually the sector was organized a bit like that. I don't see that, you know, sustaining. I think it'll be a much more ecosystem of different services coming together under an umbrella. So there's a lot more relationship management, there's a lot more third-party providers as part of the system, and there's a different skill set to manage in that world. So I think there'll be leadership challenges and leadership opportunities, but that's what will have to change, because we're a margin pressurized sector, as a lot are. We've got to find more effective and efficient ways of doing it, and just tinkering around processes and what we've always been doing is not meaningful enough. I think we've got to embrace, you know, the opportunity we have now to see can we radically transform. So there'll still be there'll be need for digital, but there'll be a lot more, I think, because of the structures will be different. There'll be stronger leadership, real strong people engagement required. So that certainly won't go away, and that'll be more enhanced because the system won't be as linear as potentially it has been previously.
Yeah. And look, it sounds to me, Nigel, you know, and we obviously speak to lots of different companies, but the fact that, you know, more companies are having conversations now around, you know, maybe fine tuning the remote piece a little bit, I think it'll help retention. You know, I think there will be probably companies that are able to, because we would come across quite a few people who say, look, I would love to keep my job, but it's just trying to get into Dublin 2 or Dublin 1. It's a very busy city, you know, so I think the practicalities around that should be good for retention.
Completely. I'm a country bumpkin myself, and you know, the idea of being able to work in Sligo, or, you know, where I'm from, or, you know, for a Dublin operation, you wouldn't have thought about it in the same way as you do now. So, and it plays to that diversity agenda I talked about earlier. I genuinely feel we can keep people for longer, but we still have that problem of we still have to overcome this sense of kind of identity. So how do you know, when I do exit interviews with people who leave our organization, that the one thing that it dominates the conversation is leaving the people. It's not leaving the process, not leaving regulation, it's not leaving their boss, it's leaving the people and the environment that they work in. And that's, I don't know, that's particular to our, I presume that's not unusual to our organization, but so how do you replicate that in a world where people are not seeing each other as often? I think that's an issue, and to a small extent in some roles, how you develop people remotely. Because a lot of it is built on, you know, we say, and you guys tell us that, you know, a lot of development is 70 or 80% done on the job, and 20 or 30% kind of external facilitated learning. You know, I think it's just that bit harder when you're not seeing it and feeling it and having like water cooler conversations about things. So we have to find a way of, if we are going to move to a more remote way of working, there has to be mechanisms that bring that together, or else we lose something. The essence of organization, I think, will dissipate a little bit.
And then just finally, we were saying before, and I know there's lots of different countries, and all the different groups have responded very well. You know, the general feedback, and we always hear what we want to hear in terms of the green jersey, but I think a lot of the Irish companies seem to have adapted reasonably quickly, you know, in terms of having to move forward, you know, being able maybe to deal with that bit of uncertainty, being able to sort of problem solve on our feet a little bit. And I think that's been your experience from your local team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I'm involved with the kind of UK team, but principally responsible for Ireland and Germany, and it's been very interesting as in an exercise of, you know, how things work. And, you know, we know UK can be a bit more rules based. I think as a nation, and I know we do wear the green jersey, but I do think adaptability is at the core of something about kind of Irishness, and I think we are fast to adapt. And because we're probably not as rules-based as my English or German colleagues, once there's a general sense of purpose and energy around something, you can rally people in that direction. Whereas, I know I can set the direction of travel for the Irish business. I know to do the same thing in our German business, it'll also have to come with 10 or 12 rules as to how it should be done. And I think in times of adaptation and creativity, the Irish mindset just seems to get on with it, and are happy-ish or happier. If they're 80 or 90% content, they'll move on. Other people need to get to understand all the rules, or understand to 90 or 100% before they move on. And I've certainly seen that through this, and I would stand over the flexibility that I've seen of our people in Dublin. And I don't think it's unique. I think it's something about us that does stand to us.
Yeah, very good, brilliant. So I promised you in around 30 minutes now. You've been very good at your time. So thank you very, very much. And look, well done. I mean, this has been sort of challenging times, and obviously there's still lots to go. But it sounds to me, you guys have adapted very impressively, and wishing you the very best of luck for the months ahead.
Thanks, Paul.
Cool.
And to you too.
Cheers.